Welcome into this special and final edition of the Fieldhouse. The state championships have been won. We're into the new year, 2026. I'm Jerry Hamilton, joined by the Godfather, Carl Padilla. Man, that's what the high school coaches call you. Coach Buck has one or two, or I don't know, 9 state championships, however many he has. He's got a lot. First, I want to start with you guys' takeaways from the state championship games. We have 4 high school coaches that are joining the show today. Coach Coach Surratt will be first up. But what were you guys' main takeaways looking back on the state championship games this year?
Go ahead, Coach Buck.
Well, one thing was the attendance. I think they set another record for attendance, which is always neat. Now, as an old football coach, I like just having my crowd there and not 20,000 other people. But it's neat for our state, neat for the UIL, neat for our fans of high school football. And then some really good games, I watched almost every one of them, starting with, the 6-man all the way to the 6A, and impressed with all aspects of how the games came out, and how the UIL did a great job again of hosting putting it all together.
Carl, what were your thoughts on what you saw? I thought the numbers from victory.com, over 3 million people, I believe, viewed online the state championship game. So further Coach Buck's point, attendance in person, but that was a huge win for victory.com in the state of Texas in high school.
No doubt. It always helps that you don't charge people to view stuff. And so that was a big asset for them and their viewership, and congratulations to them. And of course, all the people who are so vitally interested in seeing high school football games. That was fantastic. It was great to see a first-time winner in Hamilton and Ryan Marwitz. Of course, Coach Gaston won his first state championship at North Shore, but he's been around for several as the offensive coordinator. Coach Doty, who's on the program today, he won his second state championship, and now I think Stephenville's up to 7, which puts them close to the top 5 or top 6 in state history. And then, of course, our first guy on in just a second, Coach Surratt, he's at 11, and he's won every one that Carthage has ever won. They're 11-1 in state championship games. He's 11-0. And so he's chasing Coach Buck and Alito for most state championships. So Smithson Valley winning back-to-backs, incredible. Sock making the finals for the 5th year in a row and winning their 3rd title in those 5 years. Obviously, DeSoto won their 3rd title in 4 years, and congratulations to both Jason Todd and Claude Mathis. We keep going on, but I think it's time for Coach Buck, Coach Surratt.
Let's do it. Let's bring in Coach Surratt from Carthage. Won 11th state championship. I still, even though we've been friends for years, I still have a hard time wrapping my head around that number. Coach, welcome into the show. Thank you for joining us for a few minutes today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, man.
First question. I'll hit the first question. These last few years have to have been special for you, having Jet coaching your son and having him be the quarterback of this team. What is that? Looking back on that, kind of your thoughts on having your son as the quarterback, won 3 state titles out of 4 years. Kind of what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a pretty special spot to have the coach your son and y'all hoist trophies together for multiple years.
Yeah, to be honest, it's nothing better, but nothing worse, if that makes sense. It was so much pressure, and when we didn't get it done his sophomore year, and we probably should have got it done that year and had some turnovers, didn't play a very good game, got beat 47 in overtime. And after that was so much pressure, and it wasn't much fun his junior year. Even though he had a great year, we won the championship, but it was just, I just wasn't me, and it was, I made sure that it was going to be fun this year. I didn't care if we went 0-10, it was going to be fun. It was my last time to go with him, and luckily, we had a really good football team, and he got healthy, and that was a lot of the frustration that he hurt his shoulder. You saw him hit a golf ball his freshman year when he was 15 years old, but there was a lot of frustration. But it ended great. He never was 100% healthy, probably 80%, and he's getting better every day after that major surgery he had in the summer. And but no, man, it's nothing better coaching your son.
Coach Buck, what you got?
Scott, when you look at what you've done, looking back at it, how did you just continue to keep the kids motivated year in and year out? I mean, winning one is hard enough, but winning 11 is simply amazing for any state, any place, any game. But how did you do it? How did you keep your kids motivated and focused year in and year out, going into now going to go try to win 12 next year?
Yeah, Coach, you'll know more than most of us. Just you got to keep it competitive every day. It's got to be a competition, and between our athletes, and we go one-on-ones more than probably most in our division anyway. Just keep it competitive, and some positions obviously are way better than others, but somehow you got to make those guys have a different strategy or whatever way to make those guys better. But 90% of our positions, we keep it competitive and make sure that they're one play away that they're not going to be a starter. And we're very fortunate that way. And I know you guys are or were. And I think it's the only way you can do it. And especially nowadays, you give a kid something, that's not a good idea. And so we've got to make it competitive. And I think that's the way we get better every year.
When you got to Carthage, for people that don't know, like Carl kind of went over some of the numbers earlier, but when you got to Carthage, nobody ever foresees what has happened. When you got to Carthage, what were the biggest things in front of you at the time?
Just change of mindset and culture, really. Nothing against the guys in front of me. It was just really, I got lucky and was able to hire good people. They held everybody's contract and let me bring my own guys. And that's, but, they won a district in 15 years and, it wasn't magic. Coach Buck could tell you that. You go in and put your head down and work hard and hopefully it works out. But that's the main thing is they went through so many coaches and I had never been a head coach and walked in here to the, some of the best athletes I've ever seen. That first group was our most talented group, but had never won a district championship in junior high or nothing. So that was the main thing. And luckily we won the district the first year and then got rolling right after that. And I got all my staff in the next spring. And it's just a belief that we have. And, there's only several programs in the state that you can name, probably 7, 8, 9, 10 programs in the state that has that belief that they're going to win every game, no matter if it's a down year athletically or not. And, that's a culture deal and it's hard to flip that. But once you get it flipped, you got to keep working. It's probably harder to stay on top than it is to get there. I always tell the players, it's easy. It's hard. It's really hard to climb the top of that mountain. It's so easy to fall down it. And so it's a war and a daily battle to stay on top of that thing. And that's we try to keep a chip on our coaches. I know always have one. I know Coach Buck has one. But you got to stay on top and stay on the edge. Have that edge all the time.
They're always trying to knock you off too.
Yeah, that's right, Coach. You always get everybody's best shot, but we wouldn't have it any other way.
Right.
I know my coach, high school coach Rodney Russell, I was griping. It's probably 2 or 3 years ago. 2 realignments ago, and said, "Man, we just can't find games." And this year we had to go to Bay City to play San Benito, a 6A team, and they were really good until the last 2 years. But he says he told me quit my bitching. He said you want it the other way around, like everybody in the country calling you, and no, you don't want that. But I used to look forward to realignment. Now it's like, oh Lord, just go over there. You usually walk out there with still needing 3 or 4 games.
Hey, Coach, when you first year was in 2007 at Carthage, so these kids on this state championship run this last 2 or 3 years, you've literally watched them grow up, not just since middle school, but youth age, elementary school. When's like your KJ Edwards? You're really good at running back. When's the first time you remember seeing KJ Edwards for the first time, understanding, okay, this kid's got a chance to be a really good player. Because like I said, these kids have grown up in the community, and you've watched them all grow up from a young age.
Absolutely. We have first time I saw him down here on this field, Little League, and you never know if Little League players are going to be any good or not, but he was just faster than everybody else and a special player. And then obviously seeing every game that he's played since he's my son's age, from 7th grade on up. And, special young man, that guy's an awesome young man. I mean, he's a great player, but you don't outwork him. We've already heard reports he's the first one to build an A&M, and he just obviously he ran 22 miles an hour the other day. Coach Buck will know this. I've worked really hard to get him up to 22 miles an hour.
Yeah. It's all coaching, baby, all coaching.
Jump step he's got. I mean, that's really good coaching. But no, he's a great young man. But we've had a lot of good players come through here, man.
Hey, Coach, had some technical difficulties, so I couldn't hear any of the questions or answers for the first three. So hopefully this isn't jumping on something that's already been discussed. But what's it going to be like not having Jet there next year, since he's been with you for the last 4 years at Carthage?
Well, it would be a little more simple. There's no question about that. We did everything under the sun, and we did more than anybody we've ever. He can handle everything, and he would catch us. And if we were wrong in protections, even in the board, it may be 6 of us here and there doing our protections on Saturdays and Sundays. And when I go home and meet with him, he said we can't do this or that, and that's the God's honest truth. I mean, he's brilliant. That's what we'll miss out of him. Obviously, very talented throwing it, and he had 153 touchdowns, with 7th all time, over 11,000 yards. I mean, and I think his completions, I don't remember how many it was, but almost 800, and that's 7th or 9th all time in the state. And but we're going to miss a lot because we had really good players. We don't deny that, and we had great receivers, great tight end, great running backs. But you got to have a distributor. We took 3 sacks this year. And last year I believe was 2, and that's because he could get the ball out, and we had good offensive linemen too, but he knew how to dump the ball. So we're going to miss that. We're going to miss that a bunch, but we got a very talented young man coming up. It'd be just a little different.
All right, that is 11-time state champion, Coach Surratt. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'll see you at a high school golf tournament coming up soon. We're going to watch Jet swing that golf club a little bit. Congrats on the title once again in your 11th, and we'll talk to you soon, Coach.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Good to see you, Coach Buck.
Coach.
Good to see you, Carl. See you.
All right, and we're going right back to another state championship winning head coach. We're going to bring in Stephenville's Sterling Doty, 2 state championships now, 2 perfect seasons at Stephenville, 2025, as well as a couple of years ago. Coach Doty, thanks for joining us today, and congratulations on your 2nd state championship.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thank you guys for having me today.
Carl keeps losing his feet. Coach Buck, what you got for Coach Doty?
Well, first of all, congratulations. Especially going back to back, going 16-0, like in state and winning state championships. That's not easy to do. I mean, having a perfect season is really, really special, and in coming through Stephenville with such high expectations, what did you think you did to get y'all back to the state championship and win another state championship?
Well, I just think, getting here in 19, and you do have all the skins on the wall, already winning 5 of them, and just having such rich tradition and great coaches that have come through and coaches that have influenced me. So I think you just lean into that tradition. You lean into that experience, and you kind of get back to the old school, get down to the junior high. You shake it up. You get kids excited about coming up and playing Yellow Jacket football. You create that bridge so there's nobody getting off, to go into just a single sport. You want multi-sport athletes and everybody believing in that. And then just good hard work in the weight room starts with, you got to have a good base, good talent, but also got to have a great staff. Was able to, bring in some really high character, really good football coaches with me that made, a big difference and allowed us to win it there in 21, our third season here. And then I think you find out real quick how hard it was. Because in 22, we had a really good football team. 23, injury bug really hit us. And then last year, had a very talented group as well, but just fell short. And so I think it's got to be the combination of all three things that got to happen for you. You got to be good, you got to be lucky, and you got to be talented.
Hey, Coach, I want to follow up.
Coach, did you
I'm sorry, you
bring anything in from Coach Briles when you got back to Stephenville?
Did I bring anything in?
Yeah, from Coach Briles.
Yes, sir. I think just specifically just the belief and the work ethic inside that weight room. A lot of the same principles are the same. A lot of the same old school approach to how we attack the day, but we modernized some things and changed a few things along the way, kind of made it ours. But what Coach Briles is so great doing was building those relationships with the kids. We'd run through a brick wall for him. And, I think that building just that culture of family and building that culture of getting after it every day, is one thing that we'll continue to do.
Hey, Coach, I want to ask you, I kind of, when I was watching you guys, I know y'all went 12-2 2 years ago, or when I was following you guys this year, I kept looking at junior quarterback, junior running back, 4 your top 5 receivers are underclassmen or are going to be freshmen through junior class. Did you get ahead of schedule this year in a weird way? I mean, because when y'all are pretty young at your guys who scored touchdowns for you, did at some point you say, okay, we're getting a little ahead of schedule this season, we got a chance to maybe take this big leap from 12-2 to 16-0?
I just think defensively with how many guys that we had coming back, we had 10 starters coming back. We did lose one to offense. We moved him over. So roughly right at 9 guys coming back off of the regional final team from 24. And so we knew we were going to be great defensively. Offensively, we knew that we're going to have to settle in and find a starting quarterback. We did that pretty early on there with Trot Jordan, and Trot had a great year. We hired his dad in here. His family moved in, and then really good tailback, really good receivers. It all starts up front for us. If you have the ability to run the football, that RPO system is going to open up for your whole package and everything that you want to do. So it's nice now to be able to have those guys coming back, because then you're looking at the defensive cupboard and you're a little bit dry. We've got 4 juniors that finished the year starting for us, and so we got those 4 coming back next year.
I got to follow up with one more thing for you, Coach, because I was looking back on your time in Magnolia. I'm from Friendswood. I'm a South in the Houston area. So I know about the Magnolia. You're the only coach I think that's had back-to-back 10-win seasons there since maybe before 2000 that I could find. So congrats on that. But what did you learn about yourself as a coach there at Magnolia? Because it's not a place that has the most talent. How many times were you actually more talented than teams in your district? Maybe half the time, right? But what did you kind of learn about yourself? How did you kind of evolve as a coach in Magnolia? Because that's a different deal from a talent perspective in the Houston area.
Yes, sir. So, when we first came in there in 2014, big baseball school,
Yep.
We went a couple rounds there in basketball. Football program was definitely down. I think, the ability to go to the playoffs 3 consecutive years like we did there in 15, 16, and 17, that hadn't been done. You're looking back in the 60s and like you mentioned, the back-to-back 10-win seasons. But I'm just grateful and thankful that administration took a leap of faith from offensive coordinator from Abilene, and had some ties down there in Houston. Of course, it's all about who you know. Had a tie there to the assistant superintendent that allowed me to get in the interview room, and then was fortunate enough to be able to get in there and get the job. And then it's all about hiring. It's all about timing. And then I think it's really important. We had some good talent there. Our junior high was right in the back of the Woodlands, right down there by Tomball. So a fluent community that had a lot of growth going on. A lot of people were moving out that way. We just had to keep it, secure it, and then get it from the junior high and get it up to the high school. And obviously, winning there in 15 did that. But that's the reason why I'm here at Stephenville. If I wouldn't have gone on and had a successful career being a head coach somewhere else, I don't think I'd been in line to get the job in 19.
Hey, Coach, one last question, hopefully. How is it working with your son and looking forward to senior year next year? What's all that going through your mind?
Well, when he plays the same position that I did, on the offensive line, they're center. So we go back and forth quite a bit. And I tell you what, I never challenge him at the dinner table, inside the weight room, or running around the house. I'll be walking by him. He'll pop me pretty good, like he's working, run blocking. And I got to tell him, hey, chill out with all that. And it's been a blast. And him being our oldest, we didn't really know how it was all going to work out as we started this journey. But man, it's been great. And I've got 2 more boys coming through, freshman, 5th grader, and then a little cheerleader that's a kindergartner. So we're pretty well, rooted here in Stephenville, and excited for them to be Yellow Jackets and Honeybees.
Coach Buck, you got anything else for Coach Doty?
Well, I was going to mention that, Caleb, my son, played center for us. And that is one of the neatest things in the world. It's not the pressure you have if they're playing quarterback, so that's a really good thing. But they still got to pass that stinking ball between their legs. He only had 2 incompletions passing the ball in 2 years, so we were proud of him for that.
That's really good. Talking from a former center myself. And my wife gets to hear about it with a little snap up there in the bleachers. But like you said, it's not like that incompletion. But everybody's going to yell at the O-line no matter what. We got to block somebody.
All right, Coach. I got to ask you finally before we let you get out of here. A few weeks after this state championship, 10-0 win over Kilgore. When you were headed into that game, and you talked about how good your defense was and how experienced they were, when you guys prepare and you're scouting for a game like that, any game, but let's say state championship game against Kilgore, did you guys think, okay, this game could be that lower scoring of a game, because sometimes games don't go how you think they're going to go? Obviously, Kilgore had, I believe, some turnovers, but what were you thinking going into that game, and how was it different, maybe how it played out?
We knew that it was going to be a heavyweight fight, and that every inch earned was going to be extremely difficult. And we're just going to lean into our big boys. We don't run our quarterback just a whole lot until it's time to run your quarterback. Yeah. And so I think the last, 3 games of the season, he had right over 200 yards rushing, something like that. And so we knew his legs were going to be important. Along with, our start tailback, Zyler McClendon, had a great year. But, get in there, have a few opportunities in the first half to take to put some points on the board. Didn't do that. So you get in there at halftime, 0-0. It's been a long time, a state championship game since we went in like that, any team. But you just get in there and you kind of figure some things out, and gives you a good idea. Clint Fuller and those guys, phenomenal job. What they do defensively. And so it was an all-out battle, an all-out war, but you really had some good peace. Anytime, I believe, you have the ability to stop their rushing attack, that gives you some peace, and know that they're going to have to earn it the hard way through the air. And with our front, we put pressure on what our DC was dialing up. Once we got there in the second half, really felt like, every first down was critical to keep the ball away from, keep the momentum. Then we get the 10-point lead, and then we're able to finish out the game that way.
Coach Doty, thank you very much for joining us. Congrats on your second state title. As a son of a coach, I can't imagine how special it is to win a state championship where you also played. So congrats to that and what you've done for that community. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Coach Buck. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it.
Congratulations, Coach.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yep. That's Coach Sterling Doty, two-time state champion, state championship coach there at Stephenville. So congrats to him on a second 16-0 season. I thought it was interesting, guys. Before we got Ryan Marwitz, the head coach, state champion of Hamilton High School. I was pulling for Hamilton all year because, my name's Hamilton. But, guys, talk about Coach Buck, being from that area, knowing Stephenville, obviously, how much does that mean to that community to have one of their own coming back and winning state championships?
Well, this isn't the first one that's done that. Joseph Gillespie was there. And the thing that I noticed is listen to Sterling talk. It reminded me so much of Joseph because, they both played under Art Briles. They didn't do things exactly like Art did because times have changed a little bit, different types of kids. Just like Art would do, he would change things with each team he had. Both of those guys, and Sterling did an unbelievable job of this because, Stephenville had kind of started slipping a little bit with enrollment and, athletes that they had. And Sterling did a great job of coming in, getting good staffs and keeping the kids that they had from moving off, which is, happens today in high school football. So I'm impressed. And, the Stephenville people are walking around with their chest stuck out like they should be right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it's time to bring in Coach Ryan Marwitz, state champion of Hamilton High School. Coach, I may have been your biggest fan. Look at my name all year, even though we've never met. But, Coach, thanks for joining the show for a few minutes, and congratulations on the state championship this year.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on. It's been an awesome ride. We just came back to school this week, and people are still just walking high, like you said, chest bowed out. Everybody's super excited. We got a parade next week. So the communities come out, man. It's been awesome for everybody.
Coach, you got started that big build last year, going 14-1, I believe it was, right? Lost to Stanford, I believe, or Stanford.
Yes, sir.
And so in that off season, what did you see from your guys, maybe that told you they were in your staff? All right, they're still locked in. They understand. We have a chance to actually take this next step in 2025.
Yeah, you look at the history of Hamilton football, hasn't made it past the third round, and then last year making it to the semis, and we had 16 seniors coming back this year, that were a part of that, and they got the taste of it. We really felt like after that game, we're a couple of plays here or there, and we could have been playing for the whole thing, and you never know how kids are going to come back and bounce back after, you go 14-1 and you're that close to it, how hungry are they going to be? And our seniors this year were very, very hungry. We had a great off season. We had some key injuries in that game, and those kids came back, very healthy this year. And it was a big boost for us, and then we also had some younger kids that stepped up, that those seniors were great leaders for those young kids. And at our size school, it takes, 2, 3, sometimes 4 classes to put a whole 22 out there, or a whole 11 out there on each side of the ball, to make it all happen. And it just all came together with some good group of classes all in a row. We had some great we got a great coaching staff, but those senior leaders this year, those 16 of them, we really built it on those guys these last 2 or 3 years.
Hey, Coach, congratulations on winning state. Obviously, this year you had a little rougher start than last year. You started 3-2, lost by 2 to San Saba, and 2 to Crawford and 3 to San Saba. Was there anything in there as far as the team gelling not as fast as in 2024, or why'd you start 3-2 instead of 5-0? I guess I'd say.
Yeah, it's you obviously going into the year you want to win every single game. We had some key positions. We were starting a new quarterback this year, He played a little bit of quarterback as a sophomore, and last year he started at free safety for us, but didn't get any quarterback reps. So that was a position, we were breaking in early on in the season. We had our inside linebacker play was new also this year. And then we had a few new guys in the secondary, and starting a couple of sophomores up front. So anytime you got a few new positions going, it takes some time to gel. And those looking back, those losses are disappointing, but I also felt like those losses helped us springboard us forward. Going back last year, we were 14-1, and I felt like this year's team, everybody was wanting to go 10-0, and then once we didn't get to 10-0, I felt like they felt like maybe the pressure was off of them. And they just decided, hey, we're just going to play football, and we can't be 10-0, but let's just go see what we can do. And I really felt like we had a shot. I say it, after those two losses, you never know as a coach how 16 and 17-year-old kids are going to bounce back that next Monday. But man, the next week of practice were our two best weeks after those losses. So once I knew that those kids were going to be focused and locked in after a loss, and they were going to come down with their heads hanging, I knew we had a shot, that we were going to be able to work through any adversity that we face, and throughout the playoffs. We got down a couple of times in the games, and kids were confident the entire time. Coaches were confident, and and being able to do that, and face the adversity and teach those kids that, that life's not always easy like that. It's everything you want about high school sports and Texas football.
Coach, the Joaquin game, they started off and drove right down the field and scored and never scored again. What was the conversation between the first and second time they had the football, and why did you guys have the will to shut them out the rest of the game?
Yeah, that happened a couple of times. That actually happened in the semifinals against West Texas. They went down right off the bat. I don't know why I keep deferring, and then they go down and get up on us every single time. But for some reason, I like the ball coming out in the second half after we can see what they're doing. But that's what our defense has done. It's like, I'm like, guys, we don't need to come out and kind of feel how hot the water is. We know what it's going to be like. Let's jump right in there and get going. But they scouted us well. They found some spots on us on that first drive that hurt us. And then our defensive coaches did a great job of adjusting. We started flipping some guys late. That they're going to sprint up to the line of scrimmage and snap it quick. And our D line did a good job after that first drive of picking up pretty good on which way it was going to go, based off of where their guys were going. And our D line was able to flip and make the adjustment, and it was a total defensive effort, front all the way to the back end, made big time adjustments in the game. And, it's just a credit to our kids. We got some smart kids. They know football, and it makes our job a lot easier.
Ryan, I wanted to ask you real quick, congratulations first on the state championship. I know it's especially winning that first one is nearly, you have to pinch yourself when you when you walk out, and then the next morning you might want to make sure it wasn't a dream. But how was your first day of all season once you lose those seniors? How was your first day of all season, and what was your message to the kids going into all season? Now that you have been a state champion, what was your message to the kids?
Yeah, well, it was crazy. We played that Wednesday night. We came back. We had a late start on that Thursday, and then we were out of school on Friday. And then we had 3 weeks off because our stock show was last week. So we were out all last week. So this actually Tuesday was our first day that I could really see the kids and talk to them a lot. But, the kids are just like last year. You never know how they're going to bounce back. But like I said, we've got some good kids, some hardworking kids. We drafted some off-season teams today. We do some off-season competition stuff. So I had those seniors in this morning at 6:30 a.m. and we drafted our teams ready to get rolling. But it's it's something to build on. We're jumping up a classification, going 3A next year. Sometimes kids may get their heads down on that, but our kids they're not worried about that at all. We've actually played up the last couple of years for non-district schedule. I believe we've had 6 games in the last 2 years against 3A teams. We've had some success against them, so our kids will be confident. I believe we'll have 12 seniors next year, so it'll be a little bit smaller class, but that's usually about what our size school has, anywhere from 10 to 16 seniors. Those guys are in the driver's seat for these teams that we created for our competition. And those guys now, hopefully this spring, will develop the leadership that it takes to be a good football team.
Hey, Coach, we were talking to Coach Surratt about this with his first year at Carthage and kind of how you have to build a program. You talked about the Hamilton's history a little bit when you first came on the show. When you got there, what was the first couple of things you had to do and to really start this build? Was it more as much community as it was the kids? I mean, take us through that process.
Well, it's like every small Texas town. They're hungry. They want to win. They want to win high school football. I was actually here. This is my 4th year as head coach. So I came in with Casey Jones, who was at Brock for a while, and now he's at Lindsay. So it was really it started back then, 8 years ago, leading all the way up to now. And we had a lot of the same philosophies and ideas, whether it's off season, in football game strategy, whatever. But it started way back then, and just getting kids confident in the weight room, and just getting kids confident in competition, period. At our size school, we want to be competitive in everything. We want kids to play everything, and just getting that win mentality, whether you're playing, tennis or football or basketball or whatever it is, and it's just over the years, it's just stuck in them, and we've had a good group of kids come through, and that's what it takes, coming in at the right time, at the right place, and, having the right coaches and the right administration, and then the community support. It takes an entire town to do something like this, and we've got a good one.
Yeah, you got to update this real quick. When's the parade? When's the date of the parade? What's coming?
Next Wednesday at 5:15.
Carl's going to be there. Carl Padilla, he's going to show up for that one.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a parade of champions. Our girls cross country team just won their 4th straight state championship this year. Yeah. So it's going to be cross country and football. So it'll be a pretty good celebration on the square.
Coach, one last question. How do you have a freshman make 179 tackles and 17 tackles for loss, an interception and a sack? I mean, what kind of genes does a kid like that have?
A lot better than mine. I guess his mama was helping us out there, I guess. No, he had a good year. We actually had 3 freshmen that ended up playing quite a bit, and they all started out on the JV. We brought them up about week 3, I believe. And probably wouldn't have brought them up, but we had some injuries that that set us back a little bit. So, like I said earlier, we had some young kids step up, but those seniors, they brought them along. They really helped those guys out. They trusted those young guys, and those young guys they fed off our older leadership. So it was the perfect storm for the Dogs.
Did you have any more sons coming up behind Easton?
No, sir. I've got 2 daughters. So I got an 8th grade girl and a 3rd grade girl. So it's three more years with Easton.
Congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Coach Ryan Marwitz of Hamilton. Congrats on the state championship. Thank you very much for joining us a few minutes today. And Carl will be riding in that parade with you all next week.
Come on.
He's sending me videos.
That's awesome.
All right, Coach. Congrats, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you all for having me.
All right, that is head coach Ryan Marwitz of Hamilton, 14-2 state championships this year. Now, our final guest, man, I've known this guy for a long time, man. I watched him play in high school at North Shore. That is Willie Gaston of North Shore. Coach, congrats on your first state championship as a head coach, and known you a long time, man. I just got to ask, you have rings from when you're obviously an assistant coach. You played at U of H. What did it mean to you to win your first as a head coach?
Well, I think also, I'll be lying to say you didn't feel good, but again, you look around and the people that's been a part of this, you want to do it for everybody else, and then you want to do it for yourself last. So again, it's one of those things that I was, excited to get a chance to get one.
Hey, Coach, thank you for joining us today. Great win over an excellent program in Duncanville, 10-7. Tell me your thoughts during that game, and especially in the fourth quarter when they ended up ball for the last time.
Well, I think it's always good when you can play a team like Duncanville. You know how talented they are. I think, it's one of those games where, some of those games have been a little high scoring affairs. I think it's one time we beat them 17-10, and then you get a chance to beat them right here 10-7. I just got to give hats off to our defensive staff and our defensive players. They play really well. Offensively, I thought we did a good job of, controlling the ball, making sure we didn't turn it over in each drive and a kick, whether that be a punt or a field goal. So, but when, anytime you can end the game in victory formation, it's a good feeling.
Coach, I know you didn't have a perfect season, but you did win state. And I know, was there a point after maybe one of the loss to soccer, one of those times in the season when you said, okay, that just made our team better? Or was there something that happened during the season at that point you knew, hey, I think we got a chance to win it all?
Well, Coach Buchanan, it's an honor to be talking to you, brother. I know you had a whole lot of success in doing this, and you probably forgot more football than I learned. So, but I think, Coach, to answer your question, I think the turning point it wasn't so much the first game of sock, because you knew we was going up in there. We had to replace 10 starters on each side of the ball. So that really wasn't more of a concern for us. We didn't panic. I think the eye opener came to us when we got our teeth kicked in by Summer Creek. And, but you can see it that week in practice. And, it's hard to get kids dialed in and focus in for that long of a season. And then kids get caught looking ahead, and they looking back and saw what this team did to Summer Creek and what we did to that team, and they don't understand. It doesn't translate like that. You're gonna have to show up on any given Friday to play, especially in the district that we're in. So I think that was an eye-opening experience for us as a program, and I think it made our kids refocus back in. Again, you know, our kids sometimes get caught looking, oh well, see, King beat Summer Creek and the Tassy didn't play them tough, and we beat both of those pretty handily. So our kids thought all they had to do was show up, and again, this football has a great way of humbling you, and so it was a good thing. We got humble right there, was able to come back and refocus. Again, it wasn't no time to hit the panic button. Like I said, our practice habits had to get better. Saying we got to go in and practice every week. We're not good enough. And like I tell the kids, we're not good enough to have a bad week of practice. We're really not. So you got to show up every day. So I think that was the turning point for us.
Hey, Coach, I wanted to ask you this. Obviously, Coach K did amazing things. You were part of that staff. Anytime there's a head coaching change, within a community, is it going to stay the same? Is North Shore going to be the same North Shore? Of course, guys like myself who've been around y'all for years, yes, it is. But kind of talk about that process for you with new players coming in. There's always questions in community, right? Are things going to be the same when the head coach change? Kind of talk about that whole process for you, because the success has just continued to roll. Y'all got really good players, but y'all have great discipline in that program.
Well, I think, Coach K had those same challenges when he had to take over for Coach Amon. When I got hired by Coach Amon, he always had a phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think Coach K did a good job of building on what Coach Amon did. As far as the discipline, I know you can hear the echoes out there. I'm from this community. I got friends and teammates that still live in this community. I'm coaching some of their kids as I speak right now. And I think all those guys know that, the program was going to be in good hands. We're going to continue to build on the discipline and taking pride in making sure our guys are disciplined, taking pride in the way we work in the off season, taking pride in the way we just go about our everyday lives and our business. And again, I knew what kind of shoes I was going to fill when you replace a guy like Coach Legend. And look, I'm sitting here talking to a legend coach and Coach Buchanan, which is, I know more about him than he knows about me, but it's the same thing at Alito. Guys, when you replace those shoes, we didn't sit in those rooms and not learn anything. All right, we sat in those rooms and we became a sponge that soaked up everything for when we get this opportunity, whether it was here at North Shore or was somewhere else, that we was gonna be able to go up in there and run the program the right way. And again, it's not just me, like Coach Cross, and you know, Jerry, you know how good Coach Cross is and how hard he works. It's a team effort up in here. Decisions are being made, and ain't just solely by me. It's about coaches that I feel like that's been up here that understand it. We're making those decisions as a staff, and they're preaching the message that need to be preached. So it's just not about one person. I think when you're this good, and any head coach can tell you this, you're only as good as your assistant coaches. And if you got a good assistant coaches and they understand the message that you're trying to convey to the players, and they're preaching that same message, you're gonna have a chance to be good every time. You got a shot year in and year out.
Coach, I want to congratulate you on joining a very special group. As far as I know, there's only 5 schools that have achieved 3 different head coaches winning state at that school. So you joined Aledo, Southlake, obviously your school, North Shore, Stephenville, and Judson. So congratulations on getting that done.
Yeah, my good buddy that I was able to play college ball, Sterling Doty. That's my guy. We played at U of A together.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Hey, so, last thing I have for you, Coach, is obviously you celebrate the state championship, but you got to get back to work, right?
Yep.
You had a number of freshmen play for you this year. Is that as young as y'all have been? Because I can't recall that a lot of freshmen actually being impact players for you guys over at North.
Well, that's again, we went into this season knowing that we graduated a talented senior class the year before, and a lot of those guys had to come up, and we had to, it was a shuffle up and down, and some of them stuck towards the end. We had them running on kickoff. We had some guys up there. We got a good DN. They got some meaningful snaps as well. But it's probably as young as North Shore has been since I've been a part of North Shore. Again, we're excited about it. Again, we're gonna have to replace a good quarterback, but we got some guys that I feel like that's gonna have a chance to battle it out, and we'll figure out that in the spring. But again, our goal right now in this first phase in our off season, we're playing catch up, and Coach Buchanan can attest to this. Is because it's been teams that have been in off seasons for a month before you even started your off season. The advantage we have on those teams is we got, like we like to say, is our younger guys got the chance to do a little pre-spring. They had it 6 weeks right there of practice football. So our job is to catch up in the weight room right now in the off-season conditioning and just building speed and getting guys stronger.
Coach, you got anything?
That was actually going to be my question. How did you change? Have you changed your all season, being the fact that you spent 6 weeks in the playoffs? But you kind of answered that. What was your message? What was your message to the kids who are coming back when those seniors walk out? And I know it doesn't matter how good a kids you got coming back, when you're looking at that way in that all season, the first day, what was your thoughts about the team you've got coming, and what was your message to them?
Well, my very first message to them was that 2025 North Shore football team won state. Our soul is on 2026. You guys right now in the 2026 class, we have not won state. So now we got to make sure we're doing everything possible as a team to get ourselves a chance just to get better. It ain't about winning state. We preach about going 1-0. Can we win today? Can we win the workout today? How many guys are going to become leaders and making sure that this is a player-led team and not a coach-led team? And those are the great teams. Our good teams are led by the coaches. Great teams can be led by the players. So my biggest message was 2025 state championship team was won by North Shore football, not this 2026 class. So we got to come here. We got to get ready to work. Again, and Coach, you guys been at the top, and Aledo is still a powerhouse. When you go and step on that field, you're going to get everybody's best, and that's the way we like it. So we don't want it any other way. I want to schedule the best. If you guys know people, we want a 1, 2, and 3. We're looking possible right now. I like to stay local so we don't lose the sub-varsity games. Coach Buchanan can tell you it's so hard when you want those guys playing football. So when you do travel, that's the thing you lose out is your sub-varsity don't be able to play a week 1 and a week 2. So it's one of those things where we just got to continue to work and continue to punch the clock. Again, we got a lot of work ahead of us. A lot of questions still got to be answered about this 2026 season team, and we're excited.
All right, that is North Shore head coach Willie Gaston. Again, congrats on your first state championship as a head coach. As Carl Padilla said, the history of North Shore football is in front of anybody who looks on Max Preps, looks up the history of the North Shore Mustangs. I know it well, living in the Houston area and friends with for many years. So thanks for joining us. Congrats on the title, Coach, and can't wait to come watch those young guys in the spring.
I appreciate it, Jerry and Carl. Coach Buchanan, it's awesome to be up here talking with you, brother.
You bet.
Congratulations,
Congrats.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, that is Willie Gaston, head coach North Shore. Obviously played at North Shore, played at University of Houston. As he said, there was teammates with Sterling Doty. So a lot of state championships for former U of H players this year. That's one thing we know. But we're wrapping this show up, wrapping the high school season up. By the way, I wanted to say this. Thoughts, continued prayers to Coach Bob Shipley and his family with Jordan Shipley, everything he is going through, multiple surgeries. I think he's got a big couple of days coming up here in terms of learning more about what in terms of skin grafts, what some things are going to take place in the future for him. But our thoughts and prayers are with him. But wrapping this high school season up, Carl and Coach, was there a couple of takeaways from you guys? And looking forward, Carl, next year, things are going to change. We had the early snapshot enrollment numbers. So we're about to have some changes, teams moving up and down 5A, 6A, and all the way down. Kind of your takeaways from this year.
A couple of things. It was nice to see a lot of different teams make the state championship games. And it was nice to see several schools that have won 0 or 1 state championship actually win it. So those are great things. If you want to talk about tradition and the way things go, Munster's back-to-back, Smithson Valley's back-to-back, Carthage is back-to-back, DeSoto 3 and 4, North Shore's kind of like 6 and 8, or 6 and 9. You got Carthage doing all that stuff. Stephenville back for their second one in 5 years. And I'm probably forgetting a couple, but there's a lot of tradition in high school football. I think what I do and what several other guys do is not as hard as some people think, but it's always great to see new blood coming in and shaking things up. As for realignment, I predict it every year since 1999, or every other year since 1999, and we'll just see what the guys in Austin decide.
Well, the thing I take out of the season is this, every one of those state champions, they had to. It started in January. Some of them even before January, guys. Some of them started in December last year with their all season, and how that they have worked and fought through a 16-game season. And my hat is really off to the guys who went back to back. That is not easy to do. I know we had some first-time state champions too, like Hamilton, but those guys who went back to back, you can look around and see how few teams have done that in high school football in Texas, and then the pressure that's going to be on those guys to go, back to back to back, three-peat. They will try to keep that pressure off their kids, but the coaches will feel it. I promise you, they'll feel it as they make it into the playoffs and start getting closer and closer, especially the ones that are returning a lot of starters.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. By the way, on Texas football community, high school football fans, thanks for joining in weekly this season. We really appreciate you. These shows have grown and grown and grown as the season's moved along. It's our first year doing this. Carl, thank you for all the information and knowledge. I used to think I had a lot in my brain. You got a lot more in your brain, man. I don't know how you do it all. Coach Buck, thank you very much. Blake Monroe was out today, but he's done a great job hosting these shows all year. And again, we talked about Coach Bob Shipley and Jordan and his and the Shipley family. We wish them nothing but the best with Jordan's recovery moving forward. Glad those prayers have been answered when that news initially came down of what to the accident he was in and how bad that truly could have been for him and how he fought for his life. Not surprising that Jordan Shipley had that type of fight in him in a very, very, very adverse life situation. So we're thinking about you, Coach. Again, thank you to all the fans out there who've helped this show grow weekly. And we can't wait till next year. Coach Buck, Coach Padilla, you guys have a great off season. Carl, I know you'll be giving me a hard time in the chat or in the text, and I appreciate that. And thank you again to the OTF community and high school football fans for joining us all season.